Chinese citizens voiced displeasure towards their government over the handling of the coronavirus. I am Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. For the most part, we do have to commend China. They've done a good job at handling the coronavirus overall, but the citizens are voicing displeasure with the regime not exactly for their handling of the matter, but the ways in which they are abusing the trust of the populace. China was able to build a hospital in only a matter of a week, but at the same time, they've been tearing down the trust relationship between them and their populace over the span of decades at this point. To me, it seems like the beginning of a boiling point is beginning to manifest. CNBC reports that some degree of unrest is festering in China over how the citizens perceive the government's actions in relation to the coronavirus outbreak. Now, we can't really know the full scope of what's going on there for sure. We're seeing these headlines here and there about how some citizens are responding, but just given the nature of China, where information only flows one way, it's very hard for us to decipher how much of that is accurate and how much of the picture we're actually seeing. We could be seeing the whole thing, or it could just be a speck in a larger image. So given that tinge of mystery, the article then goes on to write that there was a trigger point which did in fact lead to the Chinese citizens becoming somewhat frustrated with their government. This trigger point for them was the death of one of the first doctors who actually identified the coronavirus outbreak in China. He saw this thing coming before it became headline news. The doctor's name was Li Wenliang, and he was ringing the bells before things even got heated. He was on basically ground zero, and he saw these things occurring. He's a doctor. To him, something didn't seem right. There's a lot of people getting sick right now, and it's not ordinary. So, he used the state-controlled social media channels and told some of his friends about his findings. Then, eventually, a group formed. There was about 8 of them in total, and they were essentially playing the role of whistleblowers. They were spreading the word about what was happening, and they were coming up with some theses about the situation. That an outbreak was likely on their hands, and this is where the government stepped in. The whistleblowers were reprimanded by the Wuhan police force for spreading illegal and false information. The government basically came in and they said, hey, that's fake news, that's not allowed, and we're going to punish you for doing that. This ties into our last conversation about why the government cannot be the arbiter of the truth. You are completely at their mercy in that case, as we see here. It turned out the doctor was right. It wasn't fake news after all, but there was no mechanism to allow for that conversation. There is no freedom of speech here. The government says it's fake news, therefore it is. There's no counteraction for you. When an authoritarian regime has the choice between fighting for the truth or pushing their agenda, you already know how that's going to play out. It's very obvious which one of those two is their priority. The answer to our fake news issue isn't letting government take the reins. It's not letting them control the narrative. It's empowering people, the citizens, to rationally untangle claims on their own, to give them the tools to figure out what the truth is, not to spoon feed it to them. Otherwise, you end up just developing what I would call toxic dependency, where the government can tell you whatever they want and you have no recourse to that. It's simply accept or face punishment. So now fast forward a little bit, and that doctor, Li Wenliang, gets infected with the coronavirus himself as he's treating patients. And obviously the Chinese government at some point realized he was correct. They were like, oh snap, he wasn't just crazy. It wasn't fake news. There's really an outbreak here. And then they stepped in and they did the drastic measures that they were planning. They built the hospital, they quarantined people, they shut down the city, and for the most part, they did a good job. But the issue here is the fake news accusation and the fact that they weren't willing to listen to this citizen here. Unfortunately, he then proceeds to pass away after he gets infected, and the citizens are viewing him as a hero. The doctor. I think rightfully so. First of all, you have to understand that speaking against the government narrative, for him to do that and his friends, that was a pretty brave move. Being a whistleblower in China isn't something that you are decorated for. As we saw here, the police force reprimanded them. They called them out. They said, you're spewing fake news right now and whatnot. They try to make him out to be a fool. Then despite that, he still puts himself on the front lines. He's out there treating patients with a contagious virus. Then he gets it and he dies in the line of duty. That's pretty noble in my books. It was actually the Wuhan Central Hospital that broke the news of his death via Weibo. I think that's how you say it, Weibo. It's kind of like a Twitter over in China. Then, here's where some weird stuff happens. The state-run media was reporting this doctor's death while the hospital was saying he was alive but in critical condition. The two narratives were kind of off here. People felt like something fishy was going on behind the scenes and will probably never know. In response to this emotional news, the citizens started to display displeasure with the government. They feel that they were deceived and their lives were secondary to whatever the government agenda entailed. There was someone here who saw a problem. He was calling it out. He was telling everyone, hey listen, red alert. There is an outbreak happening here in Wuhan. We have to act right now. The government just came in and shut it down without a proper investigation. There is no rational explanation for that. To not even look into it, to simply call it fake news and shut it down, is the government having an alternate agenda here. They didn't take it seriously. They should have. Any call of action like that from a doctor, someone in a community who is seeing a problem, at the very least warrants an investigation. That didn't happen though, and things got a little bit worse before China had to step in. If they came in earlier, who knows how less devastating the outbreak would have been. Some people started to post quotes on the various social media outlets available to them in China, and one of my favorites was a quote from the late doctor himself. He was interviewed by a media company prior to all of this, and he said that a healthy society should not have only one voice. This is so sad to me because it's things like that that we take for granted in places like Canada. It is such an obvious truth. There is no power for citizens to claim when the government runs the show unquestionably. That is the antithesis of a healthy society. It's a step backwards towards dystopia. Yet, we are people here who actively undermine pillars of democracy such as freedom of speech while others are crying out for it. It's ironic to the maximum. Now, CNBC managed to get some quotes from people who use Weibo, users who can't be named for security reasons, which is also another sign as to how the government in China operates. If those people were identified for saying whatever they're saying right now about the Chinese government, you can bet there would be consequences that come along with that. So, the first person who gave a quote says, the top searches on Weibo, and the news is all they want you to see. Lies are also made up by what those at the top want to make up. I'm losing confidence in the artificial, or my bad, I read that wrong, the official media, but artificial media seems pretty fitting as well. Then he says freedom of speech doesn't exist at all. Somebody else says it's really just a show from the beginning of the epidemic till now. It's all being made up, one lie after another. Then another person says, I love this country, love the people in this country, the land, the rivers, but I do not love the country's rulers. And of course, these are anecdotal, but they confirm things that we know to be true already. They give us the pulse of how some segment of the population in China feels. That's vital in the country where the narrative is spun by the government. So people have a beef with anecdotal evidence, but not all the time is it a bad thing. Here's an example of it in a terrible situation. If you simply base your entire premise on the anecdote, then it's ill-founded. But that's not what we're doing here. We already know that China lacks certain freedoms. We know it as a fact. They do not present any sorts of freedom of speech or expression to their populace. Having the citizens tell you their story about that isn't simply basing an argument on the anecdote itself, and it's a distinction to be made here. So, thus far, over 600 people have died of the coronavirus, and over 30,000 have been infected. Here's the cherry on top though. Some citizens who were more critical of China started using a hashtag on their social media that said hashtag I want freedom of speech. Then, guess what happens? The hashtag gets censored. Well, at least China made it easy for us to witness just why people need that in the first place, because you can't say what you want. You can't even ask for freedom of speech without getting censored. Super ironic right there. You must also understand the environment in China is just oppressive to the core. The people are abused by the governments in open fashion. It's a tragedy, and I feel nothing but sympathy towards the people. This is also not a problem with an obvious answer. There isn't much that we can do externally to force upon a change. China is a behemoth. But what we can do, though, is supporting citizens from within who want to enact change. That's a different situation, and one that can actually pose a solution. Real change comes from the inside. from within a country when people are pushed to their breaking point, when they see no other alternative but to fight. It's a sign of courage, and I believe this is growing amongst the populace. It's our job to let them know that we understand them, that we support them, and that we believe in them and what they're asking for. These are pillars of our democracy, pillars of a society that we are lucky to live in. These people just want the basics right now, just the freedom to say what they want to, freedom of speech, and even that is resulting in strict censorship from the authoritarian regime that runs the country. Once these citizens are leading the change, then we can start doing things like putting pressure of our own via things like a united sanction front, coming from a combination of Canada, America, and Europe. Going in solo probably won't work for most of us. America can hold their weight, but Canada, we get crushed. Europe probably wouldn't stand too firm either. And this is where I think America has made mistakes in the past. They've gone into countries and they forced upon changes given these horrible regimes that existed, but they did that without the citizens leading the way. The people who live there need a shared vision. They need a plan. It is their country. After you topple the oppressive government, they have to pick up the pieces and rebuild. You can't just go in there, destroy something, and have a population who isn't ready for the change and try to expect them to just adopt it. They have to create that vision themselves, and they have to want to bring it into fruition. We can't just go in and shatter the system and try to impart our ideals. It has to be coming from the populace. Now, I should also mention too that I would be remiss to not tell you the entire story here. You shouldn't just base your disdain for authoritarian regimes on the benefits of a democracy. You should understand the positives of an authoritarian regime as well, and from that, make your analysis. Not based on a half-truth, but understanding the full reality here. So, authoritarian regimes, they do have their benefits. They can build a hospital in a week. They have mastered their economy, and they're growing rapidly. In only a handful of decades, that Chinese government has uplifted the entire population. They've gone from a struggling country to one that is providing their citizens massive economic benefits. They make decisions fast, and they can do it without worrying about things like the upcoming election. In Canada, you have a 4-year term. You're almost forced to think in the short term. You have to do things now. You have to prove to people in this window of time that you deserve to be reelected again. You can't be thinking about something 20 years down the road, starting a project that will last for 10 years because you might not win the next election. The next guy might come in and just crush your ideas. This is where an authoritarian regime has the upper hand. They can think long term. They don't have to worry about the people. They can do what they want to do, and if they see a benefit, they're going to go after it. Even if it pisses off the population, they're not worrying about voter sentiments, and that there is a source of massive efficiency. We can see the results here. China has grown at a breathtaking pace. There is no other country in the world that can do some of the things that China can. The benefits of the system are visible. The populace sees them too. I'm sure there is some gratitude for what's been done for them. The real question is though, is the price that people are paying worth it? Especially in their context now. It's very different than from 30 years ago. If you are in a struggling country, you might need that boost to spark the economy, to get things going. China now is an economic giant. A lot of that population is living with a decent amount of wealth to their name now. It's not as it was before. Things are very different and people can actually think about this question now. Money isn't the only matter on their mind. It's very different if you're starving. Then yes, you're willing to make concessions here and there. But as your life becomes more stable, as the diminishing return of money comes into play, you can ask yourself the real questions here. Is there a better balance that we can achieve between efficiency and freedom? I think the answer is yes. Are certain things more important to humanity and our society than the ability to control? That's what authoritarian regimes are about. They can control you efficiently and provide massive returns to you, but it's still a mechanism of overt control. There isn't freedom there. I think what we've seen in places like Hong Kong and now in some subset of the Wuhan population are signs of what's coming down the line. The people, like the human soul, really is calling for something greater. They don't want to be living in a constant state of misinformation, a constant state of fear for speaking their mind, a state where they can't even trust anything they hear in the media because they know exactly where it's coming from the government. Now you can make the case that maybe that's the same thing too in Canada and America. You can't trust the media, but at the same time though, you have the power to change that. You can become the media. You can enter the field and start producing the kind of things that you want to see. You have the power afforded to you to make these improvements. In China, there is no such case. You try to do that, you're going to go to jail. It's just not with the government narrative. How long can you go on enduring these conditions, especially as new generations are born? People who are growing up in more stable societies who aren't worrying about certain things. When you have a trade to make, then it's acceptable. If the price of putting food on your table is submission, then you're going to do it. But if submission is the outcome and you're not really seeing the benefits, you're going to be more likely to question that. That's becoming more and more trendy in many places around the world right now because there is a mechanism for global comparison. People aren't just trapped in a silo these days. There is the internet. You have a cell phone. Now that's why China too tries to limit internet access, because there's a lot of things in the world that will get people to think they don't want you to think, as made evident via the state-controlled media. They want you to consume what they have to tell you, and that's it. Because the real enemy of authoritarian regimes is a educated populace. A populace who has ideas, who want to see their ideas be enacted. People who aren't simply okay with going with the flow. They're going to do what they can to stop that. And I think too, if the people in China are ever able to pierce through this government's grip, places like, not even just China, even in Russia, the things that we're going to learn from whatever's been going on in the past decades is going to be mind-blowing. If you think things are bad now, given our limited understanding, wait until the dam explodes and all the information comes to light. Things like these camps for religious minorities in China, whatever Russia's doing with their elections, it's all under wraps right now because the government's controlling it. But when they lose their grip and we learn more, I can almost guarantee you it's going to be stuff that makes the history books. The last thing I'll say on this topic for now is that we are not far removed from the possibility of malevolence in our world. It's a very real thing that's happening in a lot of places around the world, so living in a bubble and not acknowledging that is a mistake. So, that now brings me to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a review and share. That will help us grow. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at PerryPlatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.